Not because you want to, but you have to. Be bold and no time to be bashful. Grab life by the horns like a natural. Be sharp, be quick, and be agile. Never ever let a competitor catch you. Stay ahead of whatever is trying to pass you. Though it's not a race, sometimes that's how you gotta operate.
This is Samuel Ray. Welcome to the Morning Boot Up, segment where I sit down with my coffee and just talk about whatever's on my mind for a little bit. So, last week, while I was doing my one stream for that week, I wasn't playing this game, but it came up in conversation with one of the viewers in chat. So, I was telling them about, I can't remember who brought it up, but they brought up Rumbleverse. And I simply, I didn't know why, because obviously I was streaming. But as it turns out, while I was live on stream, the official Twitter account announced that the game will be shuttering its doors, completely closing down servers in February. And on the stream, I was telling them, since they brought it up, they didn't even say that it was closing down. I think they said they were playing it or something. I don't remember. But I basically was telling them about how I tried to enjoy Rumbleverse, and I gave it more tries than I probably should have. I only really do that when I really want to enjoy a game. That's the only time I give it multiple attempts to win me over. I did the same with the Guilty Gear series, and I did the same with Dissidia NT, because I absolutely loved Dissidia. Dissidia was the reason I even got a PSP way back when. So, when I really want to like something, I am more than open-minded. But in the case of Rumbleverse, there were things about it that were just so off-putting for me, and it all came down to the game feel. And unfortunately, the things that I didn't like about it were part of the core design and would not be changed. So I was telling them about what I didn't like about Rumbleverse as the announcement was happening on it closing down. So, I don't know. I mean, I'm not usually the kind to toot my own horn, but, well, honestly, when I put bias aside and give something logical analysis, honestly, I don't miss. Like, legit, my conclusions are more often than not proven to be pretty accurate, at least as far as what the results end up supporting. In this case, I found a lot of things about Rumbleverse that just made it not fun to play, and then, gave it multiple tries throughout its lifetime, and now it's getting shut down in, 6 months after full release? It was a very short lifespan, shorter than that of Dissidia NT, shorter than that of, what's another game I didn't care for that got shut down? Well, it's not something that I didn't like, it's something that I did like but got shut down. Paragon. That was a different case though, because enough people loved it that there was like 3 different successor games being developed by indie studios, and 2 of them are doing quite well for themselves right now, actually. So that's an inverse case, actually, now that I think about it. But yeah, no, Dissidia NT lasted, I think, about a year, a little more than a year, on its home release, its international release on the PlayStation 4 and then later PC. And they had to switch it to free-to-play, and that still wasn't enough to fix the problems with it and get more players, so they announced that eventually they're going to shut down the servers. Of course, they've left that to an undefined time. And then they announced that they are going to cease, all DLC, including the DLC they had already promised to release in the near future. So there was a bunch of characters and maps that they were planning on releasing that never came to be. And when I find problems with a game that come down to their core design, I'm usually on the ball. So I wanted to talk about Rumbleverse and why I didn't enjoy it and why I think it did poorly and what it could have done to really become something that more people would have enjoyed and enough would have enjoyed in order to keep it from dying after just 6 months. the main thing for me was the gameplay and the game feel. So many times while playing, since the game has a priority system where, if I remember correctly, strikes beat throws, shields beat strike, but throws beat shields, but then you have a scale of priority where strike skills beat throw skills when they're used at the same time, and what was it? I think it was normal skills beat vicious skills? I can't remember that one exactly, because that's how little intuitive sense it made. And super beats everything. That's just straight. The super grab beats everything. You literally have to dodge the right way because they gave it limited reach. That was its only weakness. And you couldn't dodge away because you would get caught by the magnet hands. You'd have to dodge through them. But if you were close enough when they started it, you're screwed. There's no dodging. And that's where it came down to what really messed up my ability to enjoy the game. They didn't use hitboxes and hurtboxes in order to detect whether moves worked or not. No. That would make it too easy, I guess, to dodge things or use the higher priority skill, if you have one, on reaction. That like most fighting games, honestly, and the developers of Rumbleverse developed, what was it? Killer Instinct 2013, a fighting game. So honestly, part of the issues do kind of come from there, I think, and it's kind of similar issues to why I can't enjoy most modern fighting games. But it's too difficult, or sometimes impossible, to be rewarded for using the proper counterplay on reaction. You see the move coming at you, you use the thing that should beat it in the priority, but the way they programmed it, you still get, you still lose that interaction. And that just feels bad, Because you see your move coming out, the one that should win, because it is, by the priority system, higher priority, but then you still get beat because of how they programmed hit detection. That, I believe, was the biggest reason, and the reason why, as I ended up learning through discussion in their Discord server, was that instead of using hitboxes and hurtboxes to detect when a move made contact, which would allow for things like close dodges, which is one of the things I enjoy about Naraka Blade Point, is the ability to have those close dodges and then counterattack. It just feels so good. Well, in Rumbleverse, they use hit detection cones. So there's an invisible cone of whatever circumference and length that they determine according to each move in order to attempt balancing them out. And when the move is initiated, when you press the button and the move starts, if the opponent is within that cone, the move will work 100% of the time. That's what created those moments of being magnet pulled into the hands of an opponent when they use a grab skill, or their attack, whether it be a grab or a strike skill, kind of homing in, having just crazy tracking, like, oh, I dodged to the left, but they just pulled a near 90-degree turn and hit me anyway. I've had that happen. It didn't happen often, but I've had it happen enough for me to notice. Or maybe they turned at a 45-degree angle and still connected, despite me, sprinting in that direction, or doing a dodge in that direction. Well, that's because if you're in that tracking cone when the move is initiated, that hit detection cone, then it'll use a combination, the game will use a combination of magnet pull and homing to make sure the move connects. And that's because since it was a 50-person battle royale or a 40-person battle royale game, they could not use rollback netcode. So that was their workaround. Was to try and counteract any kind of input latency and lag with this crazy detection cone, homing plus magnet pull thing. But the problem there is, like I said, it made the counterplay just frustrating, because it's like you see yourself, you have the decision making to quickly do the counter option. That should hard counter it according to how they program the game and how they portray it to you in the visuals on the pause screen where it shows you the priority scale. But because you didn't use it on prediction, because you didn't use it before the opponent used their skill, if you use it on reaction, in reaction to seeing the opponent doing something, you lose. And not everybody is a heavily reactionary player like I am. Like, I'm a defensive outboxer type of guy. I'm like that when sparring in real life. Even. I'm a fencer type, you know? Keep them at the reach of either arm's reach or whatever weapon you're using, and react to what the opponent's going to do, gathering data on how they want to approach, and then when I see an opening or a habit that I can exploit, then I strike. So if I can't dodge something on reaction when I've made enough space that it looks like I should be able to, the game just feels bad to me and I can't have fun with it. And the two ways that happens is when either the attacks in the game are so fast that they're not reactable to the human eye and reaction speed, which is a lot of the more popular fighting games in that genre, especially the ones with air dashes or the anime fighting games. They tend to be blazing fast and you just can't do anything on reaction. You have to predict what the opponent's going to do. Otherwise you get stuck in their pressure or stuck in their long combo. Well, if you're not able to, if the game doesn't have slow enough attacks like the ones I grew up on games like Soul Calibur, Tekken, Virtua Fighter, where attacks, the animations are at a more realistic human speed, which allows for that more reactionary defense to be viable, to be usable and rewarding. So when it comes to Rumbleverse, being unable to be rewarded for using the proper option on reaction just killed my enjoyment. The only time I actually had fun with the game, genuinely, was when I was playing duos. When I had a partner who I could either communicate with and tried to coordinate, or with someone I actually know, like my brother, Cy Prime. We played some matches together, we were coordinating, it was fun. But that's because having a partner made up for some of the shortcomings of the core hit detection system. I had less time, also because all the other teams were teams of two. There was less time to really do the patient, reactionary, defensive play that comes naturally to me, and to notice, less time to notice those jank moments of homing and magnet hands. Instead, I was focusing more on positioning, coordinating with my partner, capitalizing on situations that they would put an opponent into, or intercepting and saving my partner. That changed the focus of the gameplay and made it actually fun, but only when I had a partner I could actually communicate with and coordinate with. If I had a partner who literally just was, attack, I'm just going to run at the nearest enemy and be super aggressive, which also ties into another design element of the game I didn't care for, which I'll go into in a minute, then there's only so much I could do to keep my opponent from just, foolhardy running headlong into danger and getting themselves KO'd, And then I am left alone against other parties of two. So it was high highs and low lows when playing duos, but at least there were some highs for me, whereas playing solos, it just was more frustrating than fun at its core, on this core gameplay level. But talking about aggressive play too, other aspects of their design just leaned even heavier into not wanting defensive play to be viable, my style play to be usable or rewarding at all, and wanting to incentivize players to be aggressive, was the perks system. The only way to get perks was to deal damage to opponents. You had to throw yourself into the fire to get any perks. But if you get to the end of the match, the small ring that's closing, and you don't have any perks, you're at a severe disadvantage. Very severe. Sometimes insurmountable. So if you don't play aggressively in the early game, you're going to be at a disadvantage in late game. And it's not about KOs, it was just about damage. So you could just do a lot of hit and run, which also was not fun to deal with. But if you, what was I saying? Oh, and then the perks, what perks you get are randomized. They were not, as far as I know, they were randomized and not determined by how you were playing. So sometimes the perks you get won't even be worth putting yourself in danger, or they won't fit with your playstyle, which that is a good and a bad. It's, you know, it's a positive and a negative, because one thing I do like about battle royales and roguelikes alike is the focus on adapting to what you get rather than, you know, sticking with whatever's meta, you know, whatever's the most efficient and top tier. Make do with what you get. Adaptability and flexibility rules above just pick a top tier, like in fighting games. You know, fighting games, if you don't pick a top tier, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage. In first-person shooters, if you don't have the, well, if you don't even have the top tier weapons unlocked, or you don't pick the top tier weapons, or if the top tier weapon's like something you have to purchase as DLC, and you don't have it, you're just at a disadvantage. When there's an element of random, like in battle royales and roguelikes, it's more about can you adapt and make good use of what you get. I like that, actually, so that's more of a positive to me than a negative. But Rumbleverse plays a bit more like a simplified fighting game rather than a battle royale. So in that case, if the perks you get just don't line up with what you, like the skills, the two skills you have by the time you get to the last ring, or the skill, you know, it creates these, sometimes it can create some unexpected synergies that you can take advantage of if you're adaptable enough, but other times it just creates these almost anti-synergies that are more of a detriment or just do nothing to help you. In which case you put yourself in harm's way for nothing, you know, for very little gain. And then, like, I don't know. They also, in Season 2, I believe they nerfed shields. So they made shields weaker. They made it so that when you block attacks, your stamina is drained faster. Because just on another front where they didn't want you to be able to play defensively. So just on so many fronts, this game didn't want me to enjoy it. Because in very similar ways to the fighting game genre. And I mean, like I said, the developers come from the fighting game genre. So it's not too surprising, really. But we have to keep in mind, the fighting game genre is a small niche in relative comparison to every other competitive genre that still exists. You know, we're not counting real-time strategies, because those have fallen into even deeper obscurity in pretty much all areas of the world except for maybe Korea. But fighting games are niche for a reason. It's because the gameplay and the game feel are unapproachable and unintuitive, or sometimes counterintuitive, to most people who play video games and who don't play video games. So if you take that kind of game design experience into a different genre like battle royales, and you don't hard counteract those fighting game design tendencies, this is what's going to happen. A game that can't pull in enough players to last longer than 6 months. You know, it's just... And a small thing would be, I think, the art style. It definitely has a really goofy Fortnite art style, but even more exaggerated character proportions. And I've seen some people put it that, like, with the male characters especially, you just cannot have a good-looking character unless you want to go for a barrel-chested, broad-shouldered, you know, muscle-head-looking guy. The other two is like, you know, really, really just cartoonishly skin and bones skinny, or cartoonishly round fat. You know, but for the female characters, you had a more, the standard body type was a bit more, I would say a little bit more on the curvy side, and then you had the muscular, you know, broad-shouldered one, and then the fatter one, which wasn't even as fat as the male fat one. So, you know, if you wanted to play a male character, most people felt like the characters were kind of ugly, particularly the male characters. And I get they were leaning into a goofy art style, and, you know, a very slapstick kind of aesthetic for the wrestling style melee battle royale. I mean, it made sense, and it allowed it to run on weaker hardware. So, I get it, you know? But there was a large amount of people who just didn't like the art style, and either had to look past the art style to enjoy the gameplay, or couldn't look past the art style. So that was another small misstep, I think. And then the other big one, I think, is the launch. So around the time of launch, the game struggled to have matchmaking even work, or to have server stability. Like, you would sit in the matchmaking queue for like 5+ minutes sometimes. Like, I would say it was like 3 to 7 minutes on average. And when you compare it to every other battle royale out there, you're rarely in the queue for 2 minutes. Usually you get a match much faster than that. And Rumbleverse struggled. Like, the devs struggled to fix the issue. They had to do hotfix after hotfix after hotfix to try and fix the matchmaking and the servers. And even after they got the matchmaking fixed, and I think it took almost a week to fix it, really. Like, I wanted to play it at release, and then when I just couldn't, so I started playing other games instead, and I waited until they fixed the matchmaking. But even after they fixed the matchmaking, the server stability was shoddy, and the input latency felt awful. Like, just the detection of your inputs and trying to do what you want with intention was difficult sometimes, unless you had very specific timing because of the input lag. And then you combine that with what I talked about earlier at length, the hit detection system not being based on, collision, but rather a hit detection cone that, that detected when the move was initiated rather than when the attack actually would connect. And it just results in an overall bad feeling game to play. It just didn't feel responsive half the time. And the thing is, it did great with the movement system. The sprints, the jumping, the wall climbing, the long jumping, the air dodging. It felt very similar to Hulk Ultimate Destruction back on the Xbox, GameCube, and PlayStation 2 era. Like, the movement felt great. But then they made it so that you can't even, because of the hit detection cones, you couldn't even jump over an incoming attack. Because if you jumped while you're still inside that cone, they're just gonna, home upwards, and you're gonna get magna pulled downwards. So you couldn't even use jumps to evade. Which, when you give a game platformer style movement, 3D platformer style movement, but then design the hit detection in a way that just negates it when you're at close range, you kind of have to force yourself to forget the jump button even exists when you're in an engagement with someone. When you're close enough to attack each other, you have to just not jump, because it's going to get you punished more often than rewarded. And that just in and of itself contributes to the bad game feel. And there are so many times where I wanted to, because I grew up on platformers, both 2D and 3D. I'm used to jumping to avoid danger, to avoid attacks from enemies, It's intuitive, it's baked into my muscle memory from, my whole time gaming ever since 1995. The vast majority of games I've played since then, jump is a viable evasion option. And then especially in a setting like Rumbleverse, because if you play a fighting game, obviously jumping's not going to be that much. Well, actually, it depends on the fighting game, because if you're playing the 3D fighting games I grew up on, like Tekken, yeah, jumping's not really a viable evasion option most of the time. And it's really clunky, so you don't want to do it very much, but that's because you have sidestep instead. But if you're playing a 2D fighting game, jumping sometimes can be used for evasion, actually. You can jump, usually you can jump to avoid grabs, command grabs from characters like Zangief. So even in a lot of fighting games, jumping is useful in terms of evasion properties. But in Rumbleverse, because of how their hit detection is programmed, nope, you have to unlearn that habit. And then, the stamina system was okay, I guess. There were times where it could be frustrating. Like, for example, if you wanted to run away from someone, and you're sprinting, but you have less stamina than them, then obviously you're screwed. You might as well not run. Um, they also made it so that when you're guarding using your shield, which is a Smash Brothers style bubble barrier, like there was a lag for when you dropped shield in order to make it so you couldn't shield some. So like with some attacks, if you shield and blocked, then you wanted to drop shield and punish. Depending on what attack the opponent used, sometimes you would get punished for trying to do that. Which, I mean, I guess they didn't want you to be able to just turtle up and then punish every time. But, you know, or everything, I should say, because there were some moves that were just, obviously, their recovery time after using it was long enough that you should be able to, and that was by design. So I get that, but responsiveness is important to game feel. And so if you doing an action then feels, you know, it just trying to do an action after another action doesn't feel snappy, it's going to feel bad to most people. You know, that's why a lot of people don't like the Dark Souls style gameplay, because all the moves feel, or say Monster Hunter, right? Because a lot of the moves feel so laggy and clunky. And I get it. It depends on the person's taste, of course. But I would say there's more people who think that feels bad than who think it feels good. And I think that's just fact. So, you know, that's how it is. You know, Elden Ring became bigger than the Dark Souls series because they allowed more flexibility in how you can play. So people who don't like that feel can build for something else. You know, they can build for long range attacks or use summons or use attacks that have quicker, you know, snappier feel to it. I should say weapons that have quicker and snappier attacks. So, you know, flexibility, right? But Rumbleverse didn't have much in the way of that flexibility. So, and I get it. If you're too flexible, it's hard to balance it. You know, if your system's too flexible. And I know Elden Ring has had some real balance issues for its PvP, though to be fair, PvP is not the focus of Elden Ring. Whereas in Rumbleverse, PvP is the focus. So I get it. Don't have such an open-ended system that's impossible to balance. But apparently, according to what I've read online, Rumbleverse struggled in the balance aspect too. So that definitely didn't help it to make it past the 6-month mark either. So yeah, it's unfortunate for those who did enjoy it. And like I said, I really wanted to enjoy Rumbleverse. I truly did. I gave it so many attempts to win me over. But it spoke more to the game design elements that frustrate me, like fighting games do, more so than it gave me stuff to latch onto that I enjoyed. So it was hard for me to have a positive view of Rumbleverse, and to avoid a negative viewpoint. I have to use logic and reasoning in order to avoid being just solely negative, and this may be a more negatively angled video, or rant, discussion, ramble. Not rant, because I'm not really angry. So, a ramble. But, I mean, given the context of the game's shutting down after 6 months, I think it is more important to look at why that is. You know? Take a logical look at this, because it's not shutting down for no reason. You know? Something kept the game from being successful enough, you know, prevented it from being successful enough to last, to be worth the costs of upkeeping the servers. Because even if you don't think about it, having the servers for the matchmaking to work, for the game to even work, you know, and it's an online only multiplayer game, so to have the servers up, that costs money. So to justify that, you have to be making enough money to more than offset it. And for that to happen, you have to have enough players, because only a fraction of people who play a free-to-play game will ever spend money on it. So that means the more players, the more people that will be spending money on it, because, you know, a small percent of a larger number is always a larger number. So it failed to bring in enough players that the fraction of that who would spend money on it, on the cosmetics, were able to offset the server cost. That's pretty clearly what happened. It just wasn't performing well enough in the ways that matter for these companies, because let's face it, video games are not a charity. They're a business. Any company that releases a video game has to make money back because making the game itself costs money. You got to recoup those costs, and then you got to make a profit. Otherwise, you can't develop any more balance patches, any more content, additional content, and such, without making enough money past the initial development cost to justify it, or to be able to even afford it, let's say. So, yeah. I mean, yes, it's Epic Games. They make money hand over fist off Fortnite. So they probably have the money to spare. That may be a bit more of a touchy subject in this story, because even if Rumbleverse wasn't making a lot of money, we know Epic has enough money to probably keep it running. But like I said, it's a business. You can only operate something at cost, or not that. You can only operate something at a loss for so long before you have to cut the cord. They just happen to do that faster this time. So unfortunately, that's just how it goes. The developers and us, the consumer, the best thing we can do in this situation is look at why the result happened and to learn from it. That's what we should do with anything, really. So, take some lessons from this. Have hit detection that results in a good game feel, not one that results in frustration of, I did what should have countered this, but I still got hit. That's just going to be bad game feel for more people than who like it, or who are able to look past it. Most people will take something like what Rumbleverse ended up doing with its hit detection and not like the way it feels. That's just how it is. I think that was the core thing of why, even though it was a free game, those who played it, the majority of them just didn't stick with it, myself included. And then for cosmetics to be appealing enough for people to buy them, the game itself has to have an aesthetic that's appealing to more people. I think Rumbleverse took what Fortnite did, but they went a little too far into the cartoony caricature aspect, the exaggerated proportions and stuff. I think if they reined that back a little bit so that you can make more appealing looking characters, then more people would have been willing to pay money for cosmetics. And then the last big lesson to learn is game launch. It's a free-to-play game, yes, but it's online only and it's online multiplayer only. Your game's matchmaking and servers need to be working higher than, at optimal state, or as close to optimal as you can at launch. The first weeks of a game's release will make or break it, or at the very least, will set a precedent where you're either operating, ahead or from behind. In this case, in this race, they were operating from behind because for weeks, the matchmaking and servers were just not up to par. If matchmaking had worked, then people could have forgiven the, input lag and latency feel of the servers for a while, because even if they lost, they could quickly get into another match. That's what makes games like Fortnite, Apex, and whatnot so appealing, because even if you lose, and since there can really only be one winner or one winning team among a large number of players in each match, more often than not, you will lose. But you combine that with fast matchmaking, get back into a match in a minute or less, and the frustration from that loss will dissipate because they're in a brand new match. That's crucial to this genre, battle royales, and in general, online games. You need matchmaking to be fast. So, launching the game with, struggling matchmaking, that's a big hit to your game's long-term performance for sure, because now you're operating at a deficit, and now you have to try and win people back in to the game after losing a bunch of people during the first 2 weeks. And so that's another big one. But yeah, Rumbleverse had a lot of cool ideas, and I hope those ideas make it into a better product in the future. The devs, I don't wish anything ill towards them, of course. Even if I was mostly negative and critical of Rumbleverse, I have nothing against the people who made it. Just take the ideas that worked and learn from the things that didn't work, like that hit detection cone system. that definitely didn't work, I don't think. So, yeah, hope I wish them the best on their next project, whatever they're working on next or start to work on next. They have the potential to make something great. They just have to definitely distance themselves from their previous experience in fighting games, because most aspects of fighting game design just don't work for people who aren't already into fighting games. So the next game they make, hope it's a hit. Hope it makes up for how this one went and is able to go the distance more so and reach a bigger audience than Killer Instinct 2013 before that. I like I said, Rumbleverse had some cool concepts. The grabs in the game were really freaking cool. Like, they just felt good when they worked. Problem is, on the opposite side, it didn't feel good when you couldn't dodge something or use the counter tool, the higher priority tool, on reaction. So find a balance in how you design those. But it had some great concepts. The wrestling aesthetic, of the moves, I should say. The feeling of, like, Izuna dropping or choke slamming someone off of the top of a building, bouncing off of a car, and then just getting huge damage in a big crater. That kind of stuff felt good when you were able to do it. It was quite nice. So I hope those concepts make it into something else that overall just performs better. And in the meantime, if you're looking for a melee combat battle royale where the focus is not on using guns, the only one I would say out there is Naraka Blade Point. It's on PC and Xbox and has crossplay between the two. It's not a free game, it does cost money, so if you're not sure about it, grab it on a discount. But I would say it's really worth it, honestly. It avoids a lot of the missteps that Rumbleverse had. It came out before Rumbleverse, yes. It had a bit of a troubled early period of its life, but then after they restructured it a little bit and launched it on Xbox, the game got so much better. And I have a video or two on my channel, one of playing it with a couple of VTubers I know way back during its earlier launch, and then another video of playing it more recently. And in that recent video, there was 2 moments in it that I highlight where someone does a vertical attack and I dodge it to the side. I do a sidestep dodge, narrowly avoiding their strike and then counterattacking them. And that just has such a good feel, such a good game feel. It's so satisfying to be rewarded for using the right option in a situation. And in that situation, I wasn't doing it on prediction. I saw the attack and I just instinctively, my body said, dodge. And I dodged and it worked, I wasn't thinking about what I was doing. I was just operating off instinct. I saw the attack coming and I let my fingers do whatever came to mind, which was dodge to the side. It worked and I was able to counterattack, and it all happened at a fast pace, and it just felt good and snappy and responsive. And its priority system works consistently. You have your vertical and horizontal strikes, you have your charge attacks, which armor through regular strikes and then do huge damage, and then you have your parry, which counters the charge strikes and disarms the opponent of whatever weapon they were holding when they did that charge strike. It's consistent. It works every time, as long as your timing is correct, regarding the parry at least. And that just gives you a good game feel, because if you use the right option for the situation, it will work every time, regardless of whether you did it on prediction or on reaction. And that's honestly how Rumbleverse should have felt. If you did the right option on reaction, it should have been rewarded. And so if you want something that has a bit more of an intuitive and satisfying game feel, that's a melee battle royale. Sure, Naraka does have a couple of ranged weapons, like the crossbow and the musket, but they are more mid-range. You're not going to be getting hit by a projectile attack from halfway across the map, like in a lot of these shooter battle royales. There's nothing like that in Naraka. Ranged weapons are like mid-range, and then the majority of it is up close with like swords, daggers, and such. Nunchucks. And that's what the random battle royale element is the weapons you get. And so you need to be able to perform well with whatever you get. So it still has that element of, battle royales, but it's melee combat, and it's really fun. And I would say in it, trios is the most fun way to play, to just be completely honest, because then you can synergize your characters, the different character skills, and if you communicate with them, even better. And that's what my first video on the game is. So if you feel like going back to that, you can find it pretty easily. And it's just, it's a good game. I'm gonna play more of it now for sure. And it's a lot of fun, I think. Honestly, each character has unique skills and an ultimate, and you can even customize the appearance of the characters' faces, and there's all sorts of different outfits you can unlock. And even if you don't pay any money, there's still a lot of good stuff you can unlock if you're just playing the game. And I would say overall, it's a very satisfying melee battle royale. So it definitely does a lot of things right that Rumbleverse didn't. That's for sure. So that's not an attack towards Rumbleverse per se. But comparison is, like they say, comparison's the joy of, what is it? Comparison is the thief of joy, but that's only when you're comparing yourself to something else. Comparing two similar products is actually a good way to figure out what one does better than the other, and what one can learn from the other. Because all sorts of artistic, creative mediums are iteration, learning from the past, whether it be your own mistakes of the past, and failures in the past. Well, mistakes, failures, and successes in the past, but also learning from the mistakes and successes of others. So it's not a bad thing necessarily to compare the two, as long as you don't use one as a reason to attack those who like the other. So never attack the people who like Rumbleverse. They're losing a game they enjoyed. That's never something that feels good. So I definitely, have condolences towards those people, and the developers as well, who put so much time and effort and money into making the game. That's why I wish the best to the developers in their next product, that they learn from this and make something that hits in ways that this one failed to. Every failure is an opportunity to learn, after all. But for the people who enjoyed Rumbleverse, you have my condolences. When I suggest Naraka, I suggest it as an alternative. It's not something that feels exactly the same as Rumbleverse, but it is the closest thing to it. So if you want a melee-focused battle royale to play, that's the closest you're going to get. So yeah. Anyway, that's it for me this week. I'm going to go ahead and get on with the rest of my day. Wish you a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, wherever you are in the world. When this releases, it's going to be morning. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Make sure you give me your thoughts on anything I said in this little ramble, okay? If anything you agree or disagree with, feel free to let me know. And if you have your own, thoughts that I didn't touch on regarding Rumbleverse, feel free to share them. Your own experiences. I'd love to hear it all. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, then I really would appreciate it if you were to subscribe, like or dislike, according to whatever you feel. And yeah, I hope to see you in whatever content I make going forward. I'm going to keep going with this morning boot up series where I just talk about something, but I've got a lot of other content coming out, daily gameplay videos, and I have some new stuff coming down the pipeline within the coming, I would say, month or so. Alright, this is Samuel Ray signing out. Have a great one. Later.